Oh,
Oh,
no,
hi,
Zoom
Andrew.
even
Thank you
tells
so
me
much.
about it.
Oh, say again?
I said Zoom even tells me about it. It says
Yes,
progress.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It's making sure everybody knows the situation. Nobody's caught by surprise.
Yeah. We mostly use Teams and work, so I'm a little unfamiliar with where all the buttons are.
I understand, but Andrew,
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for helping me in my project. And I think we should start out by maybe you saying a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, obviously my name's Andrew McCann, or Andy will do just fine. My major interest in space probably started at around the age of 10, and that's around when the Apollo 1 had this disastrous fire that killed the 3 astronauts. And I watched 7 and 9 and Apollo 8, and it got up and some circling the moon on TV and stuff like that. So it was very cool in those days, especially when you're a young kid. So it did actually force me to work and study a little harder in school than I normally would have. And maybe I was less interested in rugby and soccer and more interested in space at the time. So it did change a little bit what I did. So I've always kept it on the back burner as something that I follow along. And I think I've watched every SpaceX launch since they started, except the ones that are 3 a.m. I actually sleep through those nowadays. And the new little companies coming back. Ad Astra had a nice launch yesterday. They finally made it to orbit and released satellites, which was a little suspenseful for a company that seemed to have a lot of failures. You had to wait for about 2 hours till you found out the satellites got away. Yeah, and I find the Rocket Lab, the new neutron booster is really cool looking. I like it, it's a single stage all the way up, then it opens the fairing and it pops out a suspended second stage. There's a lot of private companies trying to make getting to space a lot cheaper. It's very fun and exciting to watch. And I have a feeling, if you're interested in seeing what people are going to do with space travel, the overall, writing problem right now is cost. And of course, the human body is fairly frail, so you can't shoot them out an accelerator and things like that. And at some point, it'd be really interesting to see if they do build, big space stations with artificial gravity and enough shielding that people can actually live out there for a while. And, I do find it interesting. And I've only tangentially worked in the space industry for maybe about a year. And that was when I worked at Textron Defense. Well, actually at the time it was AFCO. And they were one of the, original thoughts on laser propulsion. And it was kind of interesting idea is that you would shine very bright lasers on the back of a spaceship. And at the time, the back would be made out of a plastic that had lots of sodium absorbed into it, which would produce a plasma, and you would explode it with the laser light as you heated it up to unbelievable temperatures. And of course, scaling everything up to make that work was just impossible. You needed 100 megawatt lasers, and we could barely get a 1 megawatt laser to run more than a couple hours without destroying itself. But it was a really interesting project, and every now and then you see somebody comes up with the idea again and a few modifications, and that's kind of more in the sci-fi thing. Maybe 100 years from now, when you have huge solar stations taking energy out of the sun, we may have laser powered spacecraft sending things to nearby stars and stuff. Probably not so much between planets, but yeah. So that was kind of my one exciting work in the space industry. And of course, Star Wars, kind of, went away, and, it was a crazy idea anyway. It was way before its time. So the job ended, and I became a software engineer after that.
Well, do you remember back whenever you were 10, why you might have gotten interested in space?
Why a 10-year-old kid finds something cool and something not cool. That I actually have no idea. It might have been, in the days, the TV shows had, futuristic things like, the Jetsons and flying around in airplanes, and it seemed cooler than walking around the street on a bicycle or something. it was just it was the type of things you saw in movies. 2001 came out a couple years later, and it looked like, wow, in another 30 years we'll be having these huge spaceships that are just. I think that was one of the first scenes where it started, and you've always seen the sci-fi thing where the spaceship goes by and it goes by and it goes by and it goes by, and it just keeps going until finally the engines show up. So I think 2001 was one of the very first ones, that the movies where that happened, or at least that I remember. And I said, wow, that spaceship's cool. The robot, or the AI in it was like, geez, intelligent computers you talk to, it I don't know, it sounds futuristic and very cool at the time. So I don't know, it's I wasn't that good at sports anyway. Oh yeah, I have no idea how my kid mind worked, but it did work, and it did seem like it a lot.
And how old were you when Neil and Buzz first stepped on the moon in 1969?
Yeah, 69. Let's see, that would have been 12 years old. Yeah. So that's kind of why, I've been kind of watching it for 2 years since then. So yeah, it was very interesting. And the other nice little fun thing about it, at the time I lived just north of Sydney, so all the radio transmissions came through Australia first. So I saw it at like a half a second before everybody over here did. So yeah, we got to see it first.
And Apollo 17 in 1972, at the time, did you realize that would be the last time that we would step on the moon?
No, it believed, okay, they seem to be doing it so easily that, and the Saturn V was still kind of in production. They had 2 or 3 more flights with it for Skylab and stuff like that. So I didn't really I didn't really understand that, just a lot of people weren't that interested in it. It's like by the time Apollo 15 was, going around, it was really hard to find, there was only one major television carried all the stops when they, set up and put up the TV camera. And then 16 and 17, all you got was little highlight clips on the news. And, at the time, I knew nothing about political, polling and basically what other people outside, the immediate friends that I had actually thought about it. So, it's like when you're interested in space stuff, it's, the people that kind of hang around with you were also interested in it. So, it seems like this was like, okay, everybody I do, kind of liked it. So like, well, why are they canceling it? It didn't seem, to make a lot of sense. But, it's, I had, I guess I had no idea how to, sample the whole population of the countries. And, the fact that it was a little less than, 50%, it just wasn't that critical. Yeah, I just saw like a 2024 poster go by. Yeah.
Yeah. What percentage of the population do you think knew in 1969 that we actually sent somebody to the moon?
I think almost everybody knew. There was a very interesting movie that I saw about 3 or 4 months ago. In Harlem, in New York City, there was a event that was kind of known like as the Black Woodstock. They had, huge entertainers come out. There was a great gathering and people were singing and dancing, and I mean it was all for the Black population. They were singing, dancing, having a great time. But it was also happening in July of '69, same year as Woodstock was. And, Armstrong stepped out on the moon as this concert was going by. And, they asked a few people about it and they said, it's this nice for the white guys. And then they, talked about the problems and the poverty in their section of the country, and it was they obviously knew, but they didn't really care. It just wasn't anything for them to experience. So I think that was kind of one of the first times I saw somebody talking about it and said, it's just nice for you guys that like it, but it doesn't do anything for me. So yeah, I wish I could remember the name of the movie, but it's on Netflix.
Well, if you think of it, send it to me.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in seeing it.
Yeah, well, obviously my wife would know the name of it. She knows these things.
Now, what percentage of the population do you think knows that we're going back to the moon with Artemis?
Oh, well, in the space nerd community, I would put it at nearly 100%. That I'm going to guess is, if I saw a number around the 30s, I think I would, say it was, there. And if it was below 10, I'd be a little concerned. it's like everybody, is, watching to see the SLS roll out. I think it's either today or tomorrow.
I think today. I hope today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess it depends on the weather. They were
Yeah.
saying if there's any chance of lightning, they're going to.
Yeah. You spend a couple $1 billion on a rock, it's just probably a very amazing machine, but at $4 billion a pop, you're limited to 1 or 2 missions a year. So, and that's kind of why I think the private space industry does have to, at some point contribute a lot. It's like the Starship thing. If of course Elon says you're going to do it for 6 million a mission, that's probably ridiculously low. But it's just got to be less than 4 billion. So that's kind of one of the concerns is, if you rely on 1 or 2 flights a year because the price is so high, you're probably just setting up another a larger LEM thing. I believe the current plan right now is for like 6 or 7 day stays and leaving equipment behind, so when you come back you got a little bit of a base. But I'm not sure how they're going to sustain keeping people interested in it. It's like almost everybody knows we have a space station. Does anybody actually, what percentage of the population actually is aware of what's happening on there? Other than I don't know, there's somewhere between 3 and 6 people on it. It's if Russia has the propulsion module to it, if they go away, who knows, it might crash in a couple of weeks. Is things that are going to take tens of billions of dollars. I think you need to have some population that's very interested in it. That being said, if I think about it, if the country is divided 50-50 between parties, maybe you only need 5 or 10% to sway back and forth to keep the program going. Yeah, but yes. Yeah, and if more than 50% of the population knew it, I'd be stunningly surprised. Yeah, and the other thing that I kind of read, and I didn't look into it, but on Jeopardy a couple of weeks ago, they had a Apollo program. What do you call it? Category, and I guess it got 0 answers.
That's right.
I didn't look at what the questions were, but I assume they weren't very hard, and those are relatively intelligent people.
Well, I actually, somebody dug up the questions and sent them to me yesterday. One of them was, who's the second man to step on the moon? And what was the name of the rocket that took them to the moon?
Saturn. Oh, no. Oh, geez.
And I forgot the other 3, but I had them around here.
I think they were on the same level. So, I mean, you're talking about 3 contestants that watch lots of movies, read books, and they probably know obscure authors from the 17th century or something.
And they could probably tell you what the top 10 songs were in 1969.
Yeah, they probably could, and I'll give them. I can't. Yeah, so when you talk percentages, I think that might be a very revealing, you know, what do you call it? A very revealing omen or sign is three very intelligent people, but ask very basic questions. Probably the biggest program ever, or or at least I thought it was a turning point in history. So yeah, I guess in a way that I kind of find that was a little depressing.
Yeah, it is. My original plan with this project was to go to people at Starbucks on the street, in the stores, and that type of thing. And then, COVID hit, and so I had to become a little bit more flexible. And then
Yeah.
after trying out the Zoom interviews, it definitely allows for you to talk to a much geographically dispersed set of people. But yesterday, I didn't have anybody scheduled, and I ran into a couple of people in my neighborhood, and I asked them. They didn't know we were planning to go back to the moon, and they actually were wondering, what the purpose was. Hadn't we already been there? And so
yeah, and that's going to be a hard question for politicians to put forward. I mean, when you think of it, the moon is mostly just stuff from the Earth that got ejected from a huge rock that hit us like 4 billion years ago. The dirt's kind of poisonous because it has very long, sharp. It's kind of like it has a texture like asbestos. It just wears everything. It just wears on everything, and if you inhale it, obviously we've never done studies yet, but just because it has so many sharp, spiky things in it, it's probably cancerous. So, and you go there, it's a total vacuum. In the daylight, you're in direct sunlight, and it's like 200 degrees. And then at nighttime, when the sun goes down, you're in a vacuum radiating straight out to space. It goes 200 degrees below zero. So, just surviving is a challenge. And, how do you tell the general public I want to spend tens of billions of dollars to have somebody not die in 6 days is one of the major goals. Because I believe one of the goals of the Gateway and the moon base was to simulate Mars-like missions. So in a Mars mission, you have to stay outside our Van Allen belts for about 6 months as you travel there, and then you got to survive on the surface for a while, and then you got to survive another 6 months as you travel back. So yeah, they're going to try and put people in the Gateway for longer and longer periods, set them down on the moon so that kind of simulates Mars gravity for a little bit, bring them back. But a lot of the studies are we going to die? How much abuse can the body take, and how do you put lightweight plastic things around your living module so you get the least amount of galactic radiation, and with the goal of not dying again. So I feel sorry for the director that has to say we're trying to test that people don't die. And yeah, here's a bunch of dirt that came from Earth like 4 billion years ago, and just don't inhale it. I hear it smells really bad from internal reports.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the amount of space activity in the 2020s has really increased. And we were talking about Astra earlier. They had a successful flight yesterday. You have Rocket Labs. You of course have SpaceX. You have Intuitive Machines and Astrobotics that are both supposed to be putting landers on the moon.
Yeah,
Starship should be transformational. And I wanted to run this by you and see what you think. I think the 2020s are going to be what the 1970s should have been.
I'm thinking you're right on that, but I was going to say maybe it'll be the late half of the 2020s and the early 2030s. I kind of look at in space right now. It's like the very beginning of the flying era, where I gotta point out, I'm not a historian, so if I get these historical facts wrong, it's just what I understand it now is one of the big innovations in aviation was the airmail system. America just paid a lot of companies a lot of money to fly mail between cities. And because there was at the time, dozens of people trying to build airplanes, it's not that they selected a winner or they didn't give all their money to the one or two best companies. They distributed it to a lot of companies to fly. And then sooner or later, airplanes kind of converged onto a common design. They're all one wing, commercial airplanes all tended to be low wing aircraft and very small ones, high wing aircrafts. But, we're kind of in this place where NASA, I think, kind of has a duty to support about 4 or 5 of these, little companies. And obviously, I think SpaceX still needs, they might be actually big enough to make it on their own at this point. I'm assuming Elon's got 100 billion, he should be able to get the Starship going. But yeah, if you keep 2 or 3 smaller competitors going, they all got, little clever things to distinguish them. There's people trying to make rockets with 0 human labor, so the only thing that goes in is just raw metal, and you put it in a printer and out comes a rocket. Okay, so you got to put a few electronic boards in and stuff like that, but you got the idea. I think right now that there's a lot of exciting technology demos going on, and when 4 or 5 companies figure out how to land things on the moon, it's just got to bring the price down at some point. So I think you can't, if you get just one private company, like if SpaceX dominates, right now it's very good because Elon just wants to bring the price down. But if he ever decides, well, okay, it's just time to make a lot of money, or if he dies and it gets passed on to, a public company whose only, goal is to make a profit, you don't always make profit by bringing the price down. You make a profit by charging as much as you possibly can. So that's why I think we're kind of in the age where, the government has some responsibility to keep a lot of little companies going for, probably about 10 years. And then after that, once they're up and going, it looks like we have almost unlimited, small satellite, markets for people for observing the Earth. Could be just internet services, but there's like Planet Labs. They're going around just, basically they're taking pictures and surveillance. I guess there's, I'm not, I don't pay a lot of attention to the, satellite business. I kind of just like watching the, rockets go on. But yeah, there appears to be a large demand for small clusters of small satellites working together. And once we establish a fairly routine method of, delivering those to space at a cheap price, then we can start getting into more, the bigger missions, and, there'll be a lot more, lunar missions, and, so I think we're kind of in the technology development where the goal is just to bring down the cost. That's at the, I guess when we, as a kid, I never really realized how expensive, the big Saturn V rocket was. Okay, compared to military budgets, it wasn't bad.
Well, and not only the real cost, but the perception of the cost was huge. I know I've
Yeah.
had many conversations with my father where he says, we had spent all that on improving Earth, we could have made it a paradise. But when we get down to the details, you realize that that's not reality.
Yeah, it's well, the thing is, I mean, 3 billion. I think like $3 trillion went into the Gulf War, and I mean, I'm a real cynic. I think all that was to try and open up some oil land for some oil companies.
Hard to get revenge for for issues with the previous a member of a previous generation type thing.
Or it could be something like that. But yeah, if you bought $3 trillion worth of solar panels, our oil demand would probably go way down.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Or even kind of like hydroelectric and wind farm projects and all that good stuff. But I did want to ask you one last question, and unfortunately, I have to go. But if it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm old enough that if the rocket blows up, nobody's gonna be. They'll be sad for a little while. But yeah, sure. If it was affordable, I would do it. You've been watching astronauts do it for my entire life.
How far would you consider going? Just to orbit to the moon, or would you consider immigrating to Mars?
What I could, well, when I hit my mid-70s, which it's not that too far, I'd consider immigrating to Mars. I only got 10 years left at most, and radiation weightlessness isn't going to hurt me that much at that age. Yeah, sure, I'd consider it. I try and pay off the grandkids, college, bill, and after I do that, I figure my job here is pretty much over. It'd be an exciting way to go out.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for participating in my project, and it was such a joy to get to talk to you and get your perspective. And
okay.
Just
and if I find out the name of the movie about the Harlem, Woodstock, I'll send it off to you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it'll give a different view of, a big chunk of the society. I just don't, meet much.
I understand. Yeah, I know we're all kind of stuck in our own little bubbles, especially for the last 2 years.
Well, COVID's even made it worse. It's like, I haven't been to a restaurant in like, a little over 2 years. Yeah, so the wife has an immune compromise, so it got to be extra careful. Yeah, it does wear on you after a while.
It absolutely. Yeah. I know at my work we've just gone to not wearing masks, And I've seen all these people on video conferences without masks, of course, whenever we're remote.
Yeah.
But there is something about seeing people's facial expressions in person that takes a little getting used to again.
Yeah. Okay. So,
well, Andrew, unfortunately, I gotta go, but it was so good talking to you.
Okay, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.